Hello and welcome to Shoot the Gap on Fantasy and Frames. I'm your host, Justin Taylor. I want to thank Nate for helping us out. Jorge is traveling, he's got some family stuff going on. He's hanging out working on. So Nate's in the house. Nate, I appreciate you joining me today. Thanks a lot, man.
Oh man, it's like it's coming back home, so it feels good. I like to haven't had a chance to do much IDP this year, and so of course I'm pumped. It's nothing like starting a Thursday morning off with the best way possible. Talking about a little defense.
Yep. So hopefully everybody sticks with us. Usually a Wednesday night show on Thursday morning today. So we'll get things going. Stick with us here on Shoot the Gap. Well, it's that time of the show. We go through a little IDP news and notes, more injuries ahead. Here we go. Well, it's that time of year, time of year again, I should say. Injuries just piling up. It seems like every year they feel like they get worse and worse. I know, you go back and you look through the numbers, you're like, oh no, we're right about where we were the year before most years. But it seems like there's a lot out there, and especially on the IDP side of things, going through. I don't know about you, but I'm a big Troy Anderson guy. Love Troy Anderson for Atlanta. Been waiting for him to get healthy, waiting for him to get a chance to get the full-time role. He goes out last week, has an absolute monster week with Landman out. We thought, okay, this is the Troy Anderson we thought we were going to get when he was drafted. And then, boom, just like that, knee injury. He's already been ruled out for week 5. It was a tough one. I don't know how much you have of him, but I've got quite a bit of Troy Anderson on my IDP teams.
Yeah, I do as well, and at least as much as I could have, and it sucks. It's they, like you said, we've been waiting for this for really a year and a half now, feels like, or a year and 4 weeks, but I don't know if Ventrell Miller or not Ventrell Miller. If I really want to like bump up Nate Landman as far as anything, I mean, Caden Ellis.
Yeah, Caden Ellis. Yep, I know Landman's supposed to be coming back at some point. He's on the IR still. I did not see what when he's set to come back for sure. I know it wasn't season ending. It was supposed to be one of those 4 weeks IR. But yeah, Caden Ellis, I mean, he's been getting decent numbers. I'm kind of looking at it the same way. I've got a couple teams that I've got him and Anderson on, and I'm like, okay, Anderson out. Do I play Ellis or do I go somebody else that route? Because it seems like whoever's been in there, at least for Atlanta lately, that the linebacker's been playing well. But man, it was tough to see that just monster number 1 week for Troy Anderson, and you're like, oh, right back to him being out.
It's pretty much par for the course.
Yeah, going through some of the rest of these injuries, we have Kalijah Cansey for Tampa Bay. He is looking like he is probably going to be out again this week. Antoine Winfield still working through his injury. It looks like he is possibly going to be out maybe 1 more week. Haven't heard anything definitive on him. Going over to Carolina, Shaq Thompson, Achilles injury, out for the year. So that knocks him out at linebacker. Josie Jewell went out with a late hamstring injury last week. So he's questionable for this week to see if he gets in there. If you guys are looking, check out our waiver wire articles at fantasyandframes.com. Also the waiver wire show. But Trevin Wallace, the rookie, is a possible big pickup there for Carolina. Still wondering what's going on with CJ Mosley. He's got that toe injury, limited in practice. They have not said much more about him, whether he's going to be in or out this week. Taylor Rapp is a big one for on the defensive back circles. He's out. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show, but Taylor Rapp with a concussion is likely out this week. And then we just thought, coming back a little early, somebody we talked about early in the year was Jalen Phillips for the Dolphins. Looked like, oh, man, he's going to go back a little sooner than we thought with that Achilles injury. And then what happens? knee injury. It seems like this happens to a lot of guys that have the Achilles injury. They come back and they end up hurting something else. And it does sound like now I did see something this morning say that they are expecting Phillips to be out for the season, which is just a rough one as he's going back on IR after a really good year last year. And then that late Achilles injury coming back. He's gone. Jordan Poyer is also a DNP. Not sure if he's going to be out. He's got a shin injury. Man, that Phillips one is tough, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was actually, they showing clips. It was Jordan Poyer that caused the injury.
Is that what it was? I missed that.
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, Poyer went in, made contact with his knee with his helmet, and they're thinking that at least that's the direct cause of that. So, not that it's any different than re-aggravation or re-injury as a result of quickly or coming back too quickly from that Achilles, but yeah, it was man on man, friendly fire, as they say, kind of like I saw with Kansas City and Mahomes and Rashid.
Yeah, that was another tough one.
Oh, tell me about it. But yeah, so really, really bummer for Jalen Phillips. He was always one of my favorite players, IDP and real football side.
Yeah, another team really struggling with some injuries on the defensive side. Jacksonville Jaguars. Josh Hines Allen's got a concussion. Seems like he is probably likely to miss this week. Devin Lloyd still dealing with his knee injury. He has not practiced yet this week. Still a question of whether he's going to be a go or no. We know Luenke is out for sure, so that's going to open the door for a few other guys for this Jacksonville defense to get in there. The Raiders still beat up. Max Crosby did not practice again with a high ankle sprain. He is questionable whether he will be in this week or not. And Devin Diablo is looking like he is probably out again as well with that oblique injury. So those guys are tough. Alex Highsmith, another one. Looks like he's already been ruled out again with that growing injury for the Steelers. So make sure to keep an eye there. And then another one I know a lot of people have an eye on, DeMarcus Lawrence for Dallas is now out. He is on the IR, and Micah Parsons, they're talking about how serious they think this high ankle sprain, and whether he's actually going to go on the IR or whether they're going to wait out. No word on him yet. So that's obviously a big one in the IDP circles. Micah Parsons hasn't quite been the impact player he wanted this year as far as productivity goes in IDP, but definitely somebody. If you have them, you spend a lot to get them. So always hate to see that. And hopefully this isn't a multi-week injury for him.
Yeah, there's not really an ideal next man up where it's just fitting to throw someone in for that situation. So yeah, big loss. You have a lot of Parsons this year or not?
I've got a decent amount of them. I have a few redraft leagues that I got them in. I got them in a couple salary cap leagues that were brand new. So I got them in a few other leagues. A couple people got real nervous about paying up for them, and I was able to get them in some decent spots. But I typically don't have a lot of them because I kind of missed out on them in my dynasty leagues early on.
Yeah, about pretty much the same.
So next up on the list for us, that'll be do it for news and notes. Let's get into Money or Mirage. So our Money or Mirage question for today, going to the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that has not been great defensively, but man, they put up some great IDP stats this year, which sometimes is the way it ends up working out. Week 4, Jermaine Pratt, linebacker, had 9 total tackles, 6 solo, also with a pass defense. He has scored 12 or more points in Fantasy Pro scoring every week this year. He's currently LB5 overall with 65.7 points on the season, 42 tackles, 22 solo, 20 assisted, 2 passes defense, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery. My question for you is, Logan Wilson's usually been the guy we want in IDP circles, but he's actually outscored by Pratt this year. Pratt, as I just said, top 5 currently in scoring. Do you think he's money or mirage? Can Jermaine Pratt remain a top 10 linebacker for the rest of the IDP season?
Yeah, the number of the top 10 is what takes me out of the money, even though I really want to put him there because I've been a fan of Jermaine Pratt. I feel like he's kind of been overshadowed by Logan Wilson as far as IDP circles go. I think that he's been a viable LB2, and I mean really probably more of an LB3 as far as overall finishes for the past, really, was that 5 years running now, where he's been, LB 31, LB 40, LB 45. It's so he's always fallen out, and it's because of those inconsistent games here and there. If you go back to 2023, we saw like week 1 last year, and I remember this against Cleveland. He came out and he put up 11 tackles, had the sack, had almost 30 points, and it was like, here we go. This is Jermaine Pratt time, and then backed it up with another double-digit game, and then went on a streak of 3 or 4 games where he didn't get neither double-digit scoring or really it's those things early on to start the season. It's the forced fumbles. It's the pass deflections that really have catapulted his early season, like that overall number 5 finish. I still like, with health, of course, him to be an LB2, and I'm good with that. Like low end LB2 at the end of the season. And if people aren't buying the hype, if you will, maybe it's not a bad time to try to acquire, because I don't think he's going to go from the LB5 to the LB55. I don't think that's going to happen. But solid LB2, LB3 for the rest of the season, it wouldn't shock me in the least to see, especially someone so diverse that has the capability of producing some of the forced fumbles like he's done. He plays in coverage enough that his pass deflections will be there, and the tackle volume, for the most part, has always been there. So, unfortunately, Mirage for top 10. Money for what my perception of the value of Jermaine Pratt still is, despite the strong start.
I gotta say, I gotta agree with you. I think it's gonna be a little difficult for him to stay in that top 10, even though, man, the Bengals defense has not looked great, and it's been like those guys, him and Logan Wilson, making every tackle, it seems like, defensively for them, and I think they're gonna be on the field quite a bit with the offense having a few struggles this year. But again, him holding on to that top 10, I agree with you. I think it's going to be tough to stay in that range. Now, I like your idea about maybe trying to go and acquire him. Maybe, somebody's got him. He's got off to a good start. They're maybe willing to move him because they're in their back of their mind. They're sitting there going, Pratt, he's been solid, but he's not been this great guy. I'm going to sell high on him, and maybe you can get him for a decent price without having to way overpay for him, especially if you're one of these teams that is missing some linebackers with these injuries. If you got a few of these guys that are now out for the year and you're like, oh, I need to maybe do some work because I can't even just find bye-week fill-ins. I need some guys that I can count on the rest of the season. Pratt might be a nice spot to go grab. So I like where your head's at on that one. I think I agree with you on as far as that goes. Now it's time to move on to IDP's plays and fades. Here we go. So we've been trying to keep a kind of track on some of the plays and fades for us from the weeks before to kind of let people know where we're going. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to bring up Jorge's play from last week. His play to start off was Tuipulotu from the Chargers. Playing him over with Bosa with it knocked up, a little banged up with the injuries and stuff like that. 5 total tackles, 1 solo, 1 forced fumble, and 1 pass defense. So a nice little game for Tuli there in what ended up being a little more of a defensive battle than I think people expected with your Chiefs and the Chargers last week, as that game kind of really got slowed down. But he had a nice week. No sack for him there, but he was able to get in the mix with some splash plays. My fade to go along with his play was Josh Hines-Allen. He ended up going out with a concussion, so that's always ends up being a little bit of it. But I just was not loving what he had been showing so far with the Jags. He ended up with 2 solo tackles and an assisted tackle is all he was able to put up on the defensive line last week. Nate, let's jump into your defensive line play of the week. Who's your guy that you think is gonna step up this week, maybe compared to consensus?
And I might as well. I'm coming back to shoot the gap. Might as well not get a a softball toss or a low hanging fruit, and I'm gonna go at the defensive tackle position. Now, keep
Oh,
in mind,
nice.
if it's a shallow league and you only start, say, 2 defensive ends or edge, whatever your particular designation is, might not be for you. But in deeper leagues, especially leagues that if you have a defensive tackle and you would be starting him anyway, but Zach Seiler over with the Dolphins, I have always in certain spots loved his upside. I know we lose Jalen Phillips, like you said, that's a huge loss. But you know what eases the pain of losing Jalen Phillips? The New England Patriots offensive line. They are PFF's 32nd graded offensive line. Their starting center, David Andrews, out for the season, most likely with that shoulder surgery he's going to have. The rest of the line is already garbage, pretty easy to exploit. Miami's pass rush hasn't been anything nasty, but for 2 weeks in a row now, the Patriots have been the least efficient pass blocking grade. Zach Seiler during that time has started to ramp up. He's had 9 pressures over the last 2 weeks, 9 tackles, a sack, an interception, and that's shocking as it may be. This is 2 years in a row now that he's had an interception from a defensive tackle. That's not likely to continue on. Don't get me wrong, but we've seen him. I saw Zach Seiler last year go through these same hot streaks. Start the first 6 games of the season off. He had 4 sacks. He was productive in basically all aspects of that defensive line. Helped having Christian Wilkins, who he doesn't have now, but I think that I could have picked any one of the 2 or 3 guys. I could have picked Chop Robinson to have his breakthrough week. Could have picked Emmanuel Ogbah to continue on, but Zach Seiler is going to be that guy that we'll see. I think he's defensive line 37 right now. I think he has the upside to be a DL2, especially as a defensive tackle heavy league. I absolutely love Seiler.
Yeah, I like that. If you have to start true position, start a defensive tackle. I love Seiler this week. He's a guy I like to play a lot of times when I have to start D tackle. But I think, like you said, with the bye weeks and the injuries and everything else going on, no Jalen Phillips, the Dolphins are going to have to get pressure somewhere. I think this game is going to be pretty ugly. The expected points total is real low. Both these teams really struggling. The Miami offense is just in despair right now. I think this game is going to get ugly. I want defensive guys. I want guys on the front because I think you're going to see a lot of running in these games. And like you said, that Patriots O-line has not been good. This seems like a prime spot for Seiler to have one of those big games that we've seen out of him over the years. So I like that one big time. I'll jump in with my play this week. This one might be coming out a little out of left field if you've looked at the stats and go, hey, JT, where are you coming up with this play? I'm a little surprised you're going this route. I'm going to go with, I had a few guys in mind here, but I'm going to go with kind of maybe my most controversial one, and that's Jared Verse, the rookie for the Rams. So if you look at what he's done so far, had a sack in week 1, the very first start of his career, does not have a sack since then. So you go, wow, yeah, why are you saying maybe play him this week? I like what I've seen recently out of him. He hasn't got to the quarterback. He hasn't got a sack, but he has done really well in the metrics numbers. He's right there. So he's seeing around a 70% snap share at DN, which is what you like to see. The numbers last week, pass rush grade 85.3 on PFF. He had a win rate of 50% and a pressure rate of 25%. So he's a guy that's getting there. He just hasn't quite got to the QB. The Packers have done a decent job of slowing people down. Last week the Vikings got a lot of pressure on Love. They didn't get to him, but they forced him into they only got to him for 1 sack, but he did get 3 interceptions. I think this is a week where the Rams really know they need to turn up the pressure. They don't want to sit back there and get the secondary picked apart by Love. I think they really come after him. I think this is a week where Verse, gets home again. And I could definitely see in the running game, he has been a guy that's gotten you some tackles. I think they're going to run a lot with Josh Jacobs. I think he's going to get a chance to get some tackles off the edge. So this is where I'm going with Verse this week as my play of the week. My fade of the week is going to be Tyree Wilson for the Las Vegas Raiders. And the reason I'm going with Tyreek Wilson is he's getting every opportunity with all the injuries. Malcolm Kuntz out for the year. You've got the injury to Max Crosby. He's in there. He's a guy they had kind of set up to be move inside this year. He bolts up a little bit, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, we need you back outside. Well, he saw 71% snap share last week, which is enticing. You got to like see that. The win rate was not bad, 21%, 17.9% pressure rate. So you like to see those numbers. The Broncos just get rid of the ball quickly. They get the ball out. They do not want Bo Nix holding on to it. They haven't actually given up a sack in the last 2 weeks as their offense has looked a little bit better. And I just think this Broncos defense is going to be pretty good and get off the field. While the metrics looking okay for Wilson, he's not a guy I want to bet on right now. I'm not putting him in my lineup. I just don't think he gets home. And so far he's a guy that hasn't got you really tackled. So you need a sack, you need a big play for him to get you points. And I just don't see that happening. I think the Broncos are going to get rid of the ball quick. And they haven't run it a ton, but Javonte Williams finally looked a little bit better last week for this team, in kind of an ugly game against the Jets. And I just don't think this team is nearly as good as the Jets. So this one's got me nervous. So I'm out on Tyree Wilson. I've got to see a lot more. I've got to see him get home a couple times before I would feel confidence getting him in my starting lineup.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Someone else asked me about who the next guy up if Crosby's out again this week, and then you have all this depth. And sometimes some teams, when there's that many injuries, there's an obvious hey, all the stars align. It's a good matchup. It's a pass rush or an offensive line that allows a heavy pass rush, and you think just opportunity of them if they're trailing, kind of like we expect Wilson and company to be. Well, I expect them to be. I don't know. That game doesn't seem like it's going to be real exciting, and I can't pick one side or the other per se. But yeah, I feel the same way with that. I also, if you want to talk about fades, mine is similar situation, is that it required an injury really to see that increased snaps, or at least the more attention on him. And that was with Will McDonald Jr., who without Jermaine Johnson, a lot of attention's been drawn his way. He's actually produced extremely well. I've been very happy. I hated to put him as a fade this week simply because I don't want to tarnish his name, but he has Christian Darrisaw this week. And if there's one of 5 or 6 tackles that I kind of had a tendency to avoid, sometimes you can't full avoid it depending upon depth of your league, etc. But Christian Darrisaw, so far this season, he's taken on Nick Bosa, Will Anderson Jr. Teams have lined up and they've moved pass rushers around against the Vikings to try to take advantage of Brian O'Neill, which is not even taken advantage of. They have maybe one of the most underrated tackle tandems in all of football, I think, personally. And now you have McDonald, who, despite the fact that I think the talent is there, I just don't see that him having a lot of success against either, most likely against Christian Darrisaw. And the Minnesota Vikings have been good. I mean, Sam Darnold's had time. He's been effective with that time, and he's actually, surprisingly enough, shown some scramble ability to get out of trouble. And so never would have I expected 4 weeks ago to say any team against the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold. I thought this would have been, if this was a preseason, let's look at week 4 play and fade. A preseason play for this week probably might have been Will McDonald or, one of the Jets pass rushers, even against that, just because it was Sam Darnold. But yeah, I think this might be the week. He's defensive. He's DL 25. And so I think there's some of those later options that you can move up. I guess if given the choice, JT, if you had both Seiler and McDonald, I don't know if I would start Seiler over McDonald, but I bet it would be a lot closer than I would have ever thought.
I agree with you. I think it would be close because, again, usually, like to stay with your guys, especially guys have been hot. McDonald has been hot. We talked about him last week on the show, but you're right. This is just a tough matchup for him. If you don't have better options, I can see throwing him out there again, but you're really hoping that he gets lucky this week because it's just not been there, like you said, against Darrisaw. And Minnesota, man, might be probably the surprise of the year in the NFL right now. I mean, this team has been way better. I had them slotted for last in the NFC North, and they're looking great right now. I'm a Sam Darnold lover. I talked up Sam Darnold forever, saying give the guy another chance. I was big in last year. I thought I had a crazy bet on him to win MVP. I thought there was a chance that Purdy wouldn't come back from injury as soon as he did, and then Darnold would start, and Darnold would play well, and they would leave him in there because he was playing so well. Obviously, didn't happen as Purdy came back. Purdy played really well. They obviously made it all the way, almost all the way to the Super Bowl championship. But Darnold, I did not think this was the year, but I'm loving that he got a shot, and he's looking good doing it with the Vikings. So, yeah, they've been a surprising team to go against defensively. You thought, hey, they're going to throw the ball a ton. It's going to be Justin Jefferson or nobody. And you figure Darnold's going to take hits. He's going to get turnovers. He's going to take sacks. And it just hasn't happened this year.
Yeah, it's been, I would say, and it's actually a positive that, because my daughter, she was a Vikings fan with Kirk Cousins and had basically abandoned the Vikings. And so she is now she's a Falcons fan, but still has a place in her heart for the Vikings. But it assumed, because of all the, smack talk I was telling her, that the Vikings are going to be rough this year. I wouldn't be too excited, but at the same time, there was so many conversations we all had that come week 5, week 6, end of season, we're going to look back and go, why do we not trust Justin Jefferson again as the, a top 5 pick, top 3 pick? Yep. And I think it just, the shadows he's coming out of the shadows, Sam Darnold is, and now he's not seeing ghosts, et cetera, all the positives. So I'm happy for Vikings fans and Sam Darnold, et cetera.
Let's move on to linebackers. Last week felt really good about this one. I don't know how you don't, because he has been so good, but I talked about it last week. If you looked at some of the projections on some of the sites, he was being very, very low projected every week, and I was just shocked by it. So that's why I kind of brought him up in my thing. EJ Speed was my play last week, and boy, did he have a good one. 13 total tackles, 12 solo, 23.8 fantasy points, finished 4th overall on the week as far as Fantasy Pro scoring goes. I had an over 9.5 tackle bet on him, so I love that. It was fantastic. I missed a whopper of a same game parlay by 8 yards receiving from Calvin Austin for the Steelers. So that one was that one hurt right in the gut, but Speed got me there easily. The guy's been all over the place. The Colts defense, it feels like, has been on the field a million plays this year already. I think they're plus 300 already. I don't think it's going away anytime. So Speed's a guy I continue to like, but he was my play last week, and he came through for me. My play this week is a guy who I've liked a ton since he came out as a rookie. I've just been waiting for someone to give him a chance to play, and if he wasn't going to get a chance to play, I really wanted to see him get moved, and that's Chad Muma. Loved him at Wyoming. Watched tape on him coming out. He was just a tackle machine everywhere there. Goes to the Jags, and they just kept signing guys and drafting guys, hiring him, and I'm just like, man, he just can't get in there. And then whenever he has got a shot to play, he has played really well. It's just he hasn't got those snaps, and now is the chance. With all the injuries in Jacksonville, Alakun, he's out on the IR with the injury. Devin Lloyd, they're talking about whether he comes back this week or sits another week. Muma finally got the green dot last week, played 95% snap share, which was the highest of any Jaguars linebacker this year. Even with all those other guys as starters, he played the most of anyone. He had 8 tackles in week 4 against the Texans. I think that just increases going into this week with the Colts. The Colts offense has been somewhere where people have been able to to put up some decent stats against them. It's going to be interesting to see. We don't know if Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco's getting the start. Richardson has been questionable. They're saying even if he doesn't practice, there is a chance he plays. The Colts notoriously are terrible in Jacksonville. They're on like a decade-long streak where they have not won at Jacksonville. Every Colts fan knows it. It's cost them the playoffs quite a few years by losing that game at Jacksonville in big situations. I'm excited to see what Muma can bring this week. I just want to see him. I just want to see him be really good. I want to see him show out so that he either gets a chance to stay in the lineup or somebody else, when this rookie contract is over for him for the Jags, somebody else will come get him, because I just think Chad Muma should be a starting linebacker in the NFL.
Yeah, when he was drafted, I think there was an overall consensus groan, just simply because, they attacked, or they grabbed 2 linebackers in the draft. They already had just made some moves to improve that linebacking room, and we just knew that the snaps were going to be hard to come by, but the talent was there. And then he had like that rookie season. Looking back, it was week 13. He finally gets some opportunity, and he puts up a 24.5-point game. Now, that was a lot built around the sack and a half, but the week before that, Baltimore. So you go to 2023, and you have to dig. 2-game sample sizes is what we're working with, where he's had more than 80% of snaps. And in each one, he's had splash plays of some capacity. Atlanta, he had the pass defenses to go along with 7 tackles. Against Buffalo, and Buffalo was a tough team for a Jacksonville squad that in a matchup wasn't benefiting him anyway, especially when you have to deal with, Oluokun, who's a vacuum of tackles, playing next to you. And so this year, like you said, 1 weekend with 95% of the snaps, 8 tackles. Would like the solos to improve, but I don't care. Beggars can't be choosers in this point, and it is. And I don't know what Indianapolis team we're going to see. I think that they could lean with with Jonathan Taylor having the ankle injury. Trey Sermon could be heavily utilized. They won't want to put Anthony Richardson too much out there in scrambles, et cetera, because of that hip pointer. And if it's Flacco, I don't know how that benefits or impacts Chad Muma necessarily, because I think he has good sideline to sideline speed. He's capable of being able to adapt to whatever type of game Indy brings. So I'm a fan. I'm watching more or less, even outside of my fantasy impacts. Don't get me wrong. I'm just excited to watch him play actually, a full complement of snaps again.
Hey, we actually have a question here. Commenter David, thanks for joining us, David. Appreciate it. He says Ventura Miller actually had a bigger game. Any thoughts on him? I'm just such a Muma guy that this was my spot on. Like, I saw the stab share for him. I just think he has a bigger game. What are your thoughts on Ventura Miller also for the Jags?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Indy. The total tackles allowed to linebacker hasn't exactly been immense. So you got to kind of pick your spots. You got to pick one. I think it's going to be one or the other. I hope that it don't cannibalize each other. And yes, Ventura Miller did have, the bigger game per se. Definitely had more of the solos than the assist. But I'm a bigger Muma guy, and maybe that has to do with the fact that we didn't see Ventura Miller at all because of the Achilles rupture in 23. 4th round pick, and Muma's draft pedigree and everything going in was a little bit higher, like that. Sometimes that happens, and I hate to do it that way. Is draft capital and at least expectations in my head. I think he's someone to monitor for sure. Deeper leagues, of course, Ventura Miller is valuable because if he's going to be on the field for, I don't want to say 100%, but even give me 85% of the snaps, that carries a significant value for a team that honestly their offense isn't doing much. And so I think they'll be on the field a lot. Let's see, what's their, when's their bye week? Oh, not till week 12.
Yeah, they've got a while there since the bye week for them. So, and the thing I think is interesting with this team too is, even with JT out, I think the Colts are going to want to try to run the ball a little bit. They want to try to keep that defense off the field. They've just been on the field nonstop. They've got a lot of injuries piling up themselves on defense on the D line. I talk about that a little bit in my IDP Plays and Fades article that should be out later today on fantasyandframes.com. So make sure to check that out. But yeah, I just think this team, even if it is Trey Sermon, they've shown that they, in the past, that they'll run with Trey Sermon, even if JT's out. They did it last year against Pittsburgh. They gave him over 20 plus carries. I think that could be the case again. So Dave, we think there, and another comment for Dave here says 4 watch. It should be 400. We agree with you. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for checking us out, and thanks for the questions. Good time to remind everybody, if you haven't yet, like and subscribe us here on Fantasy and Frames. Hit the notification button so when we have shows on, you will know. We do have a pretty set schedule here, but we do throw some shows here randomly here and there, like today, off at a different time when some scheduling conflicts come up. So definitely do that and check it out, as we got a little bit of everything for you here on Fantasy and Frames. So let's jump on to our next guy. That was my play, was Chad Muma. Who was your play at linebacker this week?
Mine is a little bit of the low-hanging fruit, but I think he's still, amongst many, a tad undervalued as far as your confidence. But Eric Kendricks is in line. I don't know where you have him, but he's my linebacker 3 on the week. He's Fantasy Pros LB9 right now. So granted, he's a starter in most circles, regardless of your team depth. But sometimes it's just nice to reaffirm people. And you know, Pittsburgh, they've been a gold mine to opposing linebackers. And for me, I love Demario Overshown. You know, that's been Jorge's guy for a couple of years now. Never, you know, injuries aside. But the trend is positive that he's going to be on the field more times than not. But we've seen Dallas really throw us for a loop and throw Damone Clark in there, and then they maybe want to try Marquise Bell and do a number of different mixes. Even though we haven't seen that yet this year, it's Eric Kendricks that's the full load, back-to-back double-digit tackle weeks. If Micah Parsons limited, I do expect Pittsburgh to have some more sustained drives, which could mean Dallas will be on the field more, elevating the Eric Kendricks tackle floor. It just seems like everything's aligning for him. And, you know, I think many of us that are old heads that have been playing IDP for a minute, Eric Kendricks used to be, you know, the guy. And so it's nice to have him back as the guy again. And I'm going to give him his flowers.
Yeah, I like where your head's out here, because, again, Overshown really is kind of the guy that everybody's hyped about right now. He's the younger guy. He's the flashy guy. And you kind of forget about some of these old vets that just still are get it done. And I think you said it right on there. Eric Kendricks is a guy who is putting up the stats, but maybe, you know, if you're going through your lineups and looking at IDP, people aren't like just immediately grabbing him and throwing him in the lineup. And obviously this is a great spot, as you said. The Steelers have been giving up a lot of points to linebackers, and for a team that hasn't scored a lot, they've kept the ball a decent amount on offense. So defenses are getting a fairly good amount of snaps against them. I think you're right. This is a really, really nice play, especially if you're somebody that's like been jumping around. You're like, oh, do I believe in Eric Kendricks? I think you should be believing in Eric Kendricks at this point. So I love that. Give me your fade this week. This has been the one. I think the guy you got out here is interesting, because I've seen a couple people on the other side of this play. I wanted to see what your thoughts were.
It's simply an injury type scenario where mine is Jamie Sherwood, and that's just because I am in the belief, I'm leaning on the 51% side, that CJ Mosley returns. And if he returns, Minnesota as a whole to opposing linebackers hasn't been the most generous. I mean, if you look back at the entire season so far, which is, again, only 4 weeks, but Azeez Al-Shaair is the only linebacker to have double-digit tackles. They're not turning the ball over, Minnesota, that is. And so you're not getting a ton of splash plays. And if CJ Mosley's there, it means Jamie Sherwood, I don't see a path for him to be a viable starter in shallower leagues. Certain deeper leagues, even, you know, I mean, a healthy body or a body is going to get you some play. But I'm interested, because as soon as I say this later today, this is Thursday at around 10 o'clock Central, when they say CJ Mosley's out, anybody listening will go, that Nate, what an idiot. Jamie and Sherwood to the moon. But my expectation is that he plays through and Jamie and Sherwood takes a seat on my bench.
Yeah, I like what Sure was done. It's been nice for you if you've had him, but I'm kind of waiting for Mosley to get back in there. And then, and like you said, I don't love the matchup this week, and so people have kind of jumped on him here. If I gotta play him because I'm short at linebacker, then I will throw him in there. But he's definitely not a guy I'm going, oh, he's definitely in my lineup this week, unless I have it did just don't have anybody else. So I agree with you. He's played nice. He's been a good thing. I think Mosley's going to come back sooner rather than later, even if it isn't this week. And I think Sherwood, while the production's been solid for you so far, I'm not totally buying that it's going to keep continuing. So I appreciate that. Jamie jumping in there saying, hey guys, hey Jamie, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Jumping into my fade this week. My fade last week was Trenton Simpson from the Baltimore Ravens. Just losing snap share after that really promising week one. It's kind of gone down and down from there. So he was my fade. He ended up with just 5 assisted tackles only for 3.8 fantasy points last week. So again, he kind of stays with me, hit that one on my fade list. He's staying there for me. I'm going with another AFC North linebacker that I'm fading this week, and that's Alondon Roberts for the Steelers. Peyton Wilson, the rookie, here he comes. Peyton Wilson was a guy I absolutely loved coming into the draft. When the Steelers got him in the 3rd round, I thought it was an absolute steal. This is a guy who had first-round ability. If it wasn't for the red flags with the injuries, the ACL and the knee, a couple big games where he missed with his shoulder, had quite a few extensive injury history at NC State, but man, the guy was a baller. When he was on the field, he was making plays everywhere, and he was making big impact splash plays. So he was a guy I loved. When he went there, I saw him next to Patrick Queen. I was like, this could be the linebacker core of the future for the Steelers. I loved it. Roberts, the guy plays hard. He gets in there and he makes tackles. Can't fault him at all for that, but that's really all he does is he runs, fills his gap hard, and makes tackles against the run. Doesn't do a lot else. He was down to a measly 32% snap share last week in week 4 as Wilson stepped up, saw 56% of the snap share, and I think that is just going to keep going up unless Wilson or Queen get hurt. I just see this as a trend now for Roberts going down and down. I think he's just going to be a guy that they get in if they need a breather, somebody gets something tweaked for a second. I just don't see him getting regular snaps for the Steelers moving forward. So this is a guy, why I really like him. I just think the fantasy production, I think you're in trouble moving forward with him. Only 2.3 fantasy points last week, and it's really kind of been that way. And now that he's lost that snap share, I just don't see the bright spot of playing Orlando Roberts anywhere.
Nope. If Jorge was here, he would tell you that Orlando Roberts has been my, I don't want to say nemesis because it's not a easy way. There's not a ton of Orlando Roberts hate that I spew, but I've always felt that he is a practice hero and an actual play zero because all the hype, man, as soon as he back to Miami days, the beat reporters, everybody on the team will tell you that this dude is a menace. Wait till you see him on the field. He hits everything that has a helmet on. He's a beast. And then he goes out and he gets you 3 tackles and 90% snap share. And you go, well, that's not good. And then the next week he follows suit. And I'm not trying to poo-poo on him, but I've been waiting. And like I said, with Peyton Wilson, it didn't take much for him to take over. I just was hoping the coaching staff was going to see the same thing. And so, yep, I'm right there with you. Peyton Wilson, I love it.
I think I think you're right on that. Roberts kind of feels like that special teams, scout team hero in practice. I love that analogy. He's like that guy that you see him in practice, he's going 100 miles an hour, or maybe not everyone else is all the time in practice. And so he catches your eye, but then you're like, man, he looks real good in practice, but you get him in the game, and you just don't quite see that as much. So I definitely I love that one there. I think that's a good one. Jamie jumped in. He says, "This is an odd time for Shoot the Gap. I'm used to listening at night." You are correct, sir. Yes, we usually go Wednesday nights about 10 Eastern, 9 Central time. I had a little event with the kids, a live showing of Spider-Man last night. That's my girlfriend's sister-in-law was able to get us some tickets, took all the kids to it. So we had to move the show. You know, kids come first. Girlfriend says, "Hey, we're going to something with the kids. Got to go something with the kids." So had to end up moving it to this morning. And Jorge's out of town, so Nate was able to jump on this morning with me. So that's where we kind of move it. So thanks for checking us out here on a Thursday. So we appreciate that. We got another question, and I'm not 100% up on this, so we'll see if you know, Nate. He says, "What's up with the Daniil Hunter? Is there injuries? Are we? I'm not sure if you're talking about just production for this season. The whole Houston defense has been a little bit of a mystery. I mean, love the talent that they've got over there. Love the names, but they just haven't necessarily been super productive as a unit."
Yeah, they collectively, we saw last year that it was one benefited the other as far as Jonathan Grenard, and then what Will Anderson was to see as a result. And Daniil Hunter, I know, is receiving a lot of the attention, and it bounces back and forth. Positives are that if you look at the underlying numbers, Hunter's still top 20 in pressures. His win rate is still just around that 20%, 18.6. Better times will come. I kind of had this concern going into the season that him and Will Anderson both would kind of cannibalize each other, and nobody would have that huge breakout week. But between the two, 34 pressures, PFF sacks are different, but somewhere around 5 sacks, depending upon, which I think most of our grading is not from PFF stats, but it gives you an idea that they're both effective. I believe that we all expected Daniil Hunter to come over and have that pace of a 15 sack season, just given Will Anderson on the other side and having a linebacking or defensive tackles that can help get him more one-on-ones. But it's been a little slow start for sure. I think better times are ahead. I don't know if it's trade for Daniil Hunter. Sounds like, if you're asking the question, what's going on, that means you probably have Daniil Hunter, because usually that's how we're the most in touch with how players are doing, is when they're not doing well for us
And they're on your team, right?
Yeah, on your team. Most don't have that, knowledge. But Jamie has an interesting question that I don't know an answer to either.
Yeah, Jay puts on. Do you think Reddick plays this year? Man, this is just it's a dicey situation. I don't know. I just saw today, and this was total speculation. So I don't want to make it sound like it was an actual report. But there were reports that maybe he could be in a trade talk, and sending him in a possible trade to get Devontae Adams. So I don't know if that's if maybe if he gets on a different team, he would want to come back and play this year. I'm not sure what his beef is right now, but it's man, if you spin on him, I feel for you, because just like, what is, I mean, it is really, kind of a, in the dark situation. Nobody's really talking on either side about what's going on with him. So this one's a toughie. It would be nice if we had a little bit more, a little bit more news and an idea of what is really going on. But man, it hasn't. There's not been a lot coming out from the camps, either camp, about what's going on with him.
No, and I mean, I think that there's so many pieces that are moving that you'd have to finalize. Like, I don't think there's a team or a trade that he would report to if they didn't already have a deal worked out where it was an extension or whatever he's seeking. And I don't know too many teams, if the Raiders are really wanting to, get something in return for Devontae, getting the piece already, whatever value, whatever the second round, third round, whatever their expectation is, and trying to facilitate an extension for Reddick, I don't know if that makes much sense for any team. I don't know. That's why it's like,
I mean, obviously with the injuries at DN, people start looking at things like that and are like, oh, maybe that would be a nice landing spot for him. But, would the Raiders make that move? Would he want to go there? Would it? Yeah, it's a possibility. But yeah, at this point, it's your guess is as good as mine, Jamie, on what is actually going to happen here. But man, he feels like a roster clogger right now on your team. I can guarantee it. Just sitting there going, "What is happening?" But a guy who has that much talent and stuff is. If you're in a redraft league, I'm probably bouncing him at this point. Just because I'm like, I don't even know if I want to worry about the headache the rest of the year. But obviously in Dynasty, you don't want to move off a guy like that if you don't have to. So probably holding there. But it's this. Man, we're already quite a few, we're going into week 5 of the season. I hate when I see these situations go this long. You'd hope they had it figured out by now, but who knows?
Yeah, it's been bad.
Yeah, let's jump into our defensive backs here as we finish out the show. I'll jump in with my my play of the week. My play of the week last week was Nick Cross from the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously was leading the league in tackles. He's now pretty much become the strong safety again after they moved him back to free safety. Now taking it back over. He had 8 tackles last week against the Steelers, 7 of those solo, 15.3 fantasy points. I think Nick Cross is a pretty safe bet for the rest of the year if things continue like they are. But for this week, I'm going to go with a cornerback, one of the most lauded positions in fantasy, but a guy that has been absolutely fantastic this year. And that's Paulson Adebo from the New Orleans Saints. He right now is currently DB1 in Fantasy Pro, scoring at 68.1 points. I know sometimes you see those stats and you're like, okay, do I want to trust that guy? Because we all know how cornerbacks are. A big pick, a return, something early in the season kind of really shoots those guys up the list. And that doesn't always mean that those guys are going to be able to stay there. I think he's got some staying power. I think people are still sleeping on him a bit because of, just the aversion to cornerbacks. But he was thrown at 13 times last week. 13. And I don't think that's going to stop. He goes against the Chiefs this week. I think the Chiefs are going to throw a lot of underneath passes. I think this means a lot of chances for him to get targets at him and for him to get tackles and gets passes defense and make some plays. No one's really been able to go over the top against the Saints this year. So you've really kind of had to go underneath. For a guy that plays wide, he is scoring a ton of points, and it hasn't been like he's completely reliant on a bunch of interceptions to do it. Like we say in fantasy IDP, you always want that shutdown corner unless you have him in IDP, and you want the guy on the opposite side of the shutdown corner. Latimer on the other side for the Saints means there's all kinds of work for Adebo, and I think teams are just going to keep coming after him. I think it's just going to be fantasy gold. If he's sitting on your waivers, go out there and get him because there's a chance he is. It is again, unless you're playing in a cornerback start. There's usually a lot of cornerbacks just sitting on the waiver wire. I think he's a guy worth picking up and playing. So he is my play this week. Who do you got as your defensive back play of the week?
Yeah, that is a good call, especially like you said against the Chiefs. They will try to exploit his zone if possible, and they can't go over the top. Doesn't seem like. And so between Adebo and maybe even him and Alontae Taylor, both could be defensive back plays for New Orleans. Surprisingly enough, that we're going at the corners. I'm going to stick with old, reliable, the safety position, box snaps. I'm looking at the New England Patriots without Kyle Duggar. Most likely, he didn't practice, left the game with a walking boot, so he's trending in the wrong direction. If he's unable to go, I like Jabril Peppers, who's the DB 47 this week. A little bit more deeper leagues if you're looking for someone to pick up. Jalen Hawkins could be available. He filled in. They both saw about 60% of the snaps in the box. But in the Dolphins are a team that we just said earlier, that offense is going to be – this game's just going to be gross. And I'm looking for bodies in the box. I think that when you have the weakness of the linebacking crew of New England, there's a chance that Achane and or Mostert, if he plays, could get to the quote unquote second level or the first and a half level, which is where Jabril Peppers is going to be, and or Jalen Hawkins. It's kind of a 2-for-1, depending upon your league size. I think both can be valuable and valuable. And as we said for years, heavy box snaps, teams against teams that likely are going to run more so than in this situation, more than normal, because we used to think Miami is passing. And unfortunately with with Stu Huntley, it's going to have to be on the ground. It might be bad, but I like both of those two guys to outperform their current projections and rankings.
Yeah, I like Peppers. I think he's a great move. I think, like you said, it's going to be ugly. Going to be a lot of running, trying to figure this out. I think Peppers has a chance to get up in there with the linebackers and make quite a few plays, especially with Duggar. It really seems like he's not going to play this week, as he's not been practicing. So I like that call a lot. I've got Peppers in a few situations, and I was definitely eyeing him in my lineups, going, "Oh, I might sneak him in there this week over some other guys that might be and might not have quite the match." I just want defensive guys. Most guys defensively, I want in this game. One of the guys you don't want in this game, I think you've got on your fade week. Go ahead and give me your fade for this week at defensive back.
It's Jordan Poyer. Already a little bit banged up. We know with the he didn't practice yesterday with the shin injury. He's taking out Jalen Phillips, as we said earlier. What a jerk. But the Patriots offense against more of the too high safety looks, playing deep, I don't see that offense sustaining drives, even really putting Poyer in a position for splash plays. And so it's a combination of both. It's 50% production that I'm fading Poyer. It's also 50% the fact that I think that he might not play. So I'm kind of hedging that it's an easy pick if he doesn't play. And clearly that if he does, I still think it's going to be limited. So I'm out on both aspects. I don't want people to get the idea that it's, if he plays, he's still a good start. No, if he plays, it's just as bad as if he doesn't. It's just if he doesn't play, you have no temptation, so you can't be lulled into that, Jordan Poyer trap this week.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Like I said, I want some of those guys up front. I want some of those D linemen. I want those linebackers. Maybe the guy that's in the box, but I don't want some of those. I agree. I'm avoiding Poyer in my leagues this week. I'm not playing him. I'm going back to the Chiefs Saints game. This is going to be my fade here, and it's going to be Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie, a guy I love as a player. I mean, outstanding player. He's been really good for the Chiefs, but he is pretty much been exclusively on the outside for them this year. Only 19.6 snaps in the slot, over 60% out wide. I think he's going to stay out wide pretty much this entire game. And I just don't see the Saints challenging him a ton. He's only got one double-digit scoring effort so far this year. The Saints have really gone underneath. They've kind of mixed it in with the tight ends, a lot of passes to Kamara. Now, while the offense has been a lot more efficient for the Saints, that's what they've been. They've been efficient. They're not running a million plays. Carr isn't throwing the ball a million times a game, as Chris Olave owners know and are upset about. So I just don't see them really going after McDuffie much in this game. I think this is going to be a hard-fought, really good game. Unless McDuffie gets a pick, which Carr has done really nice taking care of the football so far this year. He's been getting rid of it quicker. He has been a lot of shorter routes. He has not been really holding the ball, taking sacks like he has been in past years, which has kind of really been the knock on him is taking those sacks, making bad turnovers to the wrong play. He's kind of avoided so far doing that this year. So while I like Trent McDuffie a lot as a player, I just don't see the IDP production for him this week without a huge splash play, a pick, maybe a pick six. And I just think the Saints and Derek Carr are playing too well right now for that to take place. So for me, love him as a player, but I'm avoiding him this time around.
Yep, and I would advise the same thing. He not in the slot. In Spags' defense, a slot nickel corner for that team has always been productive because he just knows how to do those corner and nickel blitzes so well and times them appropriately that you have a likelihood of decent tackle volume in addition to some splash plays, but out wide, especially like you said, shut down corner on that. I don't see a path to him having double-digit tackles, which would be, what it would take to get there. And so I'm right there with you, man.
Yep. And to finish things out, David, thanks for joining us. He says Peppers might have re-aggravated shoulder injury, something to keep an eye on this week. If he goes, I definitely like him. But yes, definitely keep an eye on if any of those late injuries pop up. David said, thanks, guys, for the show, Brew. Appreciate Jamie jumps in there and says, with the early show, probably missing the drunk comments at night. We always laugh, me and Jorge, how we're kind of the last show of the evening of a long night of Fantasy and Phrase Wednesdays, and we're kind of that late show where we get a little crazy with the comments sometimes. So, Jamie, we appreciate you jumping in. We always love the comments late at night. But that's going to do it for us here on Shoot the Gap on Fantasy and Frames. Nate, I appreciate you jumping in, sir, and help me out with Jorge with the little things on the schedule for him. A little busy. Hope everything's going well there, Jorge. We appreciate it. But, hey, guys, make sure check us out, Fantasy and Frames, all the content you need all week long. So jump on there and check that out. Thanks, guys. We'll check you next time. Appreciate it.
Got it.